It's amazing what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit. Those words can only mean one thing. It's the official first day of practice.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's September 24th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for making us your first listen or watch. Hey, special welcome into the everydayers joining us, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, and our great Locked On Tar Heels insiders. Welcome in, everyone. Glad you're here. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Coming up on the show today, we got a lot to talk about. Several basketball pieces of news. Basketball practice officially started on Monday. The first games of the ACC schedule dropped. We'll get the whole thing later today. ACC-SEC challenge times dropped. More realignment news out west. It's crazy. Coach Brown working to clarify his comments from Saturday. All sorts of wacky stuff and some other tidbits. Plus, it's Tuesday. That means it's time for Trivia Tuesday. You ready for this? Jacoby Criswell threw for 475 yards on Saturday while everything else was falling apart around him, but that was the third most in a game in Carolina history. So today's trivia question is this. Prior to Criswell's performance, who held the top 5 positions on Carolina's single game passing record? All right, answer coming up for that at the end of the show. Stay tuned. I bet you've got some good answers for that. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Monday, the first official day of basketball practice. And I don't know about you. Look, it just every single year, I'm like a kid in a candy shop. It's like Christmas morning. It just gets me so amped because I love college basketball so much, and I love the Tar Heels so much, and I just love the anticipation and the hope and the newness and the everyone's record is 0-0-ness of it all, and I cannot wait. And here we are, September 24th, just a couple weeks away from these exhibitions. Y'all, it's coming quick and furious. It's going to be here before you know it. So buckle up and let's go on the ride of this season together. The journey is always fun. And I'll say now on official day one, the thing I'll say to you as we go throughout the season and towards the end, enjoy every single moment. These are going to be all of the lasts, whatever, of RJ Davis. RJ Davis will be finished with this season before you know what hits you. So you better soak it up while you still got it. I just always want to remind us of things like that. Now, to be fair, day one of practice is much less a big deal than it used to be because now the NCAA has changed rules. The team has basically been practicing for a while. It's just that Monday, September 23rd, was the first official day, right? Like the first day on the practice sheet, for example. And really the only difference is how long the NCAA allows you to practice. And so it takes on a different kind of a luster, but still, like, it's the official launch. Here we go. The Carolina basketball social media accounts posted this video, and it starts with Sean May, man, just has me ready to run through a wall. I'm just telling you, and brings back all these 05 vibes. It was great to see Jawad Williams there with him talking in the background. That was neat. But something else that I loved, aside from all the basketball playing of it, you see that Hubert Davis beard? It's distinguished. It's great. Got some gray in it. I'm here for it, man. He looks ready to go. Let's make it happen. Now, I said it in the cold open, but the first day of practice thought of the day is always, it's amazing what can be accomplished when no one cares who gets the credit. And as I think about that with this team, it feels so incredibly true that we don't yet know what the sum of all the pieces of this team are. And it is one of the bigger question mark teams that we've had in a while, just because we expect a lot of newness in playing style. There's quite a bit of newness in terms of some of the guys that will be contributing. And so I like being reminded of that, all in for what's on front rather than what's on the back. That adage just feels so true for this team. Well, on the first official day of practice, the ACC hooked us up, because one of the things we got was, as always, as has happened now in the last several years, the ACC will play a first round of conference games in early December. This summer, I had been predicting, based on past trends, that it would happen the weekend of Saturday and Sunday, December 7th and 8th. And that's exactly what is going to happen with this schedule. For those of you watching on YouTube, I'm pulling it up on screen so that you can see it. Actually, I pulled up the wrong one. That was the ACC-SEC challenge schedule. Now we got this for the first conference matchups coming up that weekend. If you're listening to this and not watching, that's great. You can go find it. I retweeted it on social media, and so you can find it there. So, as you probably have heard by this point, Carolina is hosting Georgia Tech Saturday, December 7th at 2 p.m. Eastern on ACC Network. And I could have set my watch to this. In fact, I think I said it this summer a couple of times, well, this game's going to be played this weekend, and it's probably going to be Georgia Tech, because here's why I say that. This is the 6th season since which the ACC started scheduling these conference games weaved into the non-conference schedule. It started in the 1920 season with the birth of the ACC network. You might recall that season. That was the Cole Anthony year. Carolina kicked off the entire season hosting Notre Dame, and then in early December went to Virginia. And Cole Anthony went off in that Notre Dame game, and it was like, man, maybe this year. Well, we all know what happened then. No early ACC games the next year just because of the weird COVID schedule. But then 21-22 at Georgia Tech. 22-23, there were 2 games at Virginia Tech hosting Georgia Tech. So back-to-back years. Last year, Carolina hosted Florida State. That was the crazy comeback game. You remember that one? And then this year, Georgia Tech again. That means that in the last 4 years, Carolina and Georgia Tech will have played each other in the early part of the season as a conference game. That's wild, right? How does this keep happening? I don't know what it is, how the schedulers keep coming to that, but here we are. So just go ahead and set it like clockwork. Early next December, Carolina and Georgia Tech coming at you. Some non-conference weekend. That'll be what it is. Something, as I look at this schedule, it really is nice to be up to an even number of teams now. That number just so happens to be 8, but there was always one team that would get left out of this in recent years because the ACC had 15 teams. And so you'd get 7 games and then some team that didn't have to play one of these. Feels like more often than not, that was Duke. I feel like that was last year that happened, but is what it is. But it's great to have 9 matchups this year. And 8 of the 9 come on that Saturday that Carolina is playing on, with the 9th coming on Sunday. So let me just read off those games in chronological order. We're going to get I guess you wouldn't call it triple header, a triple tip-off at the same timer on Saturday at noon Eastern. Clemson at Miami on ESPN2, excuse me. That to me is a very intriguing matchup. 2 teams that have some talent, and it's not sure what to make of them because of some of the talent they've also lost. So that'll be a very interesting game. Also at noon, Boston College at Wake on ACC Network, Syracuse at Notre Dame on the CW. Here we go with that. Again, good luck, everybody, finding that. The next round of games, we get 3 more. Pitt at Virginia Tech at 2 on ESPNU. As we just said, Carolina at hosting Georgia Tech, meaning we're going to need Boston College and Wake to play quick so we can get the Carolina game on ACC Network. And then Virginia at conference newcomer SMU, 2:15 on the CW. So poor Virginia gets sent off to Dallas to start off their ACC play. That just doesn't seem right, but I guess somebody had to do it, but there you are. And then in the next slot, the last slot of the day for this, Florida State at NC State, 4 p.m. on ESPNU. And then wrapping things up on ACC Network at 4, this is like the most game of all, is Stanford and Cal, and that'll be at Cal. You're not making either of those teams come west or somebody else go out there. So that's just like, it just makes a ton of sense. What'll be curious to me is how they handle that in future years. If they keep doing this early ACC game, as I suspect they will, what's going to happen with Stanford and Cal? Do they just keep squaring off for this game, or do we send somebody else that way? And then the lone Sunday game is Duke at Louisville at 6 Eastern on ACC Network. This is an intriguing game to me because if you look at it based on the past 2 years, it's like, well, this is a walkover game. Louisville's added a lot of talent. A new coach in Pat Kelsey coming over from Charleston, who Carolina has played. We know him. I think this could be a good game. I'm very interested to see what happens, and obviously it'll be in Louisville. By the way, one other quick note from the ACC before we move on. ACC tip-off, like ACC Media Days, is going to happen October 8th through 10th. That is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's in Charlotte at the Hilton Uptown. Morning and afternoon session, each of those 3 days with 6 teams in each session. The Carolina women will be Wednesday morning slot, and the Carolina men will be in the Thursday morning slot. So you can check out all that information there. Once that's over, that's when we'll start getting all the preseason voting and polls and all that. So stay tuned for that. Now, this wasn't the only ACC intel we received on Monday. Thankfully, ESPN also dropped the times for TV and order of games for the second annual ACC-SEC challenge. We're going to unpack that in just a second. Right after I tell you about 5-Hour Energy. Hey, you want to get in shape, but you're having trouble staying motivated? Make 5-Hour Energy shots part of your lifestyle and get that energy boost you need to get fit. We all know sometimes we just don't want to go to the gym, man. I struggle with that. Well, why not take a 5-Hour Energy shot to give you that feeling and alertness so you can get there? 5-Hour Energy is the brand that hardworking people like you and me have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feel that they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You always know where to find these 5-Hour Energy shots, right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, and grocery store around the nation. So stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious 5-Hour Energy shots. Go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today. And you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. The offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions and is no good on subscription orders. So go to 5hourenergy.com today. ESPN also dropped for us the ACC-SEC challenge networks and times for the upcoming event. This, interestingly enough, will take place earlier in the same week of what we just talked about. So this will be Tuesday, December 3rd, Wednesday, December 4th. Remember, the first ACC games are that very weekend, December 7th and 8th. So it's neat to be able to talk about these in conjunction, meaning, as a reminder now, that Carolina will host Alabama and then host Georgia Tech back-to-back home games. That's great news. Love it. So as you see this, if you're watching on YouTube, I've pulled up all these games. You'll notice Carolina is hosting Alabama, as I said, on Wednesday, December 4th, 7:15 p.m. Eastern on ESPN, followed at 9:15 p.m. Eastern on ESPN by Duke hosting Auburn. And that is the beginning of me being very confused by what they've decided to do with this thing. So there are 16 games because even though the ACC has 18 teams, the SEC only has 16, so you're only going to play 16. 10 of the games are on Tuesday, 6 of them are on Wednesday. It's typically inequitable in this way, and I'm sure there's some kind of TV deal or media reason to do it that way, but it doesn't make sense to me on the surface. Why not just divide it into 8 and 8 on each night? But the bigger query I have, the biggest what are we doing that I have, is why on earth Carolina and Duke, and to a lesser extent NC State, are all hosting a game on the same night of this event. Wouldn't it make a ton more sense to have Carolina play on one night, whoever they're playing, and to have Duke play on the other night, whoever they're playing. With all due respect to all these other teams, save Kentucky from these two conferences, Carolina and Duke are the two biggest entities that you have. Wouldn't you want to split them up to get a ton of eyeballs both nights? Now, I know you're going to get a lot of eyeballs on these teams in back-to-back time slots on Wednesday night, and part of that is that it's Carolina, then Duke, and it's the two Alabama SEC schools playing them. Carolina against Alabama, Duke against Auburn. That's kind of cool. But again, I'm sure there's some kind of reasoning behind this, but on the surface, to me, as somebody who's thinking through this, trying to think through this logically anyway, have Carolina and Duke on separate nights, which, oh, by the way, also allows media to try to get to both games. There's a lot of people who have to cover both of these teams, and NC State, who, again, oh, by the way, is also hosting the game on Wednesday night. And so all three of those teams are on Wednesday night, and they're all at home. If you split that up, it helps. And then let's say you are somebody who is a national writer for CBS. I don't know. You fly in to the Raleigh-Durham area, you go to Chapel Hill on Tuesday night, and then you go to Durham on Wednesday. It's nice, and you can make it to both games, take your time, get your reports in, do everything you need to do. Now, you essentially have to pick or only go to part of each game. I don't understand this, and I'd love to know why they are not split. And again, State is in this as well, and their game is a great one. They're hosting Texas. So I mentioned that the ACC only has 16 of their 18 teams playing. Well, you would imagine the thing that makes sense to do is to leave out 2 of the 3 new teams just as you work them in. And then it also makes a ton of sense, like, let's just leave out the California teams for this year. That's actually not what happened for some reason. The teams that are left out are Stanford and SMU. Actually, Cal is playing in this event. Why? I don't know. But Cal is at Mizzou, so they're flying across the country to do that, when you could just have SMU go to Mizzou, for example, keep Cal and Stanford at home, not having to travel all this way. But whatever, it'll be different in future years. Just would have made sense for year one to do it that way. Outside of the Carolina Alabama game, which, as I look at the schedule, is the highlight game of this event. So it's always great to see Carolina in it. It's funny, I was looking up their ACC Big Ten record earlier on Monday, and if I remember correctly, the Tar Heels were like 11-13 all time in those games, because they were always playing high-profile games, which you love to see, but it just means that you're going to lose more than a lot of the other schools that are playing not as good teams. So it is what it is. Anyway, here are the 7 games outside of the Carolina game I'm most excited for, in no particular order. Duke hosting Auburn, NC State hosting Texas, Miami hosting Arkansas. Similar to what I said about Miami and Clemson, really curious to see, again, Miami, they've got a stud freshman in Jae'lyn Bethea, and then Arkansas obviously is in the John Calipari era now, and so a lot of intrigue there. Another one I'm interested in is Clemson and Kentucky. Again, kind of similar reasons as to the Miami-Arkansas game and the Miami-Clemson game. Just a lot of unknowns with both those teams. Virginia at Florida. Florida projects to me to be pretty good this year. They lost their big man last year to the NBA, but they have some great other bigs, some great talented guards similar to Carolina. And then Virginia, how are they going to bounce back this year? Another game I'm really intrigued about is Wake Forest at Texas A&M. Hunter Salas coming back to Wake Forest. Wade Taylor IV is back at A&M. Salas has some size on him, so should be a really interesting backcourt matchup there in College Station. And then finally, the Battle of the Orange, Syracuse at Tennessee. Meanwhile, Clemson's like, hey, we're orange too. Sorry, you're playing Kentucky. Syracuse in Tennessee. That should be an intriguing one. I expect Tennessee to win it, but Syracuse has some interesting pieces as well. Very quickly, a couple other tidbits for you. Did you hear all the other realignment news pop up on Monday? It was like this wild flurry Monday afternoon where it was like all of a sudden, like my assumption had been Memphis is going to go and be part of this brand new Pac-12. It projects to have better football and probably basketball than the current AAC. But Memphis, along with South Florida, Tulane, and UTSA, San Antonio, all announced on Monday that they're staying in the AAC. Boggles my mind. Maybe they're hoping to hold out for AAC or Big 12 or ACC or Big 12 or something later. I don't know, but that's where that is. There was also, like, almost immediately after that, a report from Brett McMurphy that Gonzaga was going to the Pac-12, but staying like as basketball only. It wouldn't be that they were adding football. It's just, hey, we believe so much in the basketball entity because, quite frankly, Gonzaga would be the premier basketball team in that league. It's just true. But then there were more reports that it actually wasn't done yet, but there had been talks, but it wasn't set in stone. So as of this recording, because it's going to be changing by the minute, so I got to timestamp it. As of this recording, Gonzaga is not officially in the Pac-12 yet. We're waiting to hear more. Utah State, as reported by Ross Dellinger, who we've talked about, we really trust and believe in, is going to the Pac-12. So that's another Mountain West school going to the Pac-12, meaning they need just one more to make themselves FBS viable. It sounds like UNLV is now the next team in talks, and that they're not going to make a decision on Monday night. I'm recording this late Monday night, and they just want to do due diligence, make sure they've taken their time before they commit to anything. So for me, where I look at it for the Pac-12, and I love it getting resuscitated, I've heard a lot of people asking this question. It's not going to be automatically Power 5 again, but they will be an FBS school again if they can get to 8 football teams. I had said at one point on Monday, I think best case scenario for them, the way things look right now, and this was after Memphis said no, I think Memphis would have been a great ad for them. I just don't understand that for Memphis. But I had said Utah State and UNLV, half of that's already done, and then get Gonzaga. That way you have 8 football teams, a 9th team for basketball. That is your premier basketball team in the conference. And then ideally, you find 2 more teams somewhere. That gives you 11. It's very similar to the Big East, where you can then in basketball play a true home and home round robin 20-game conference schedule. That to me is the ideal for the Pac-12. We will see, though, what happens. Now, getting into the football discussion, Mack Brown, on Monday at his press conference, he had to explain fully the confusion from Saturday night, and then he tried to move on from it and focus on Duke, but the gathered reporters were not going to let that happen. I'll explain more in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. How about some college basketball national championship odds? The Heels holding strong at plus 2,000. No reason to change those odds right now. They're tied with Baylor and Gonzaga at the 4th best odds. Ahead of them, UConn, Duke, and Kansas are plus 1,000. Alabama plus 1,300. And then Houston at plus 1,600. So come on, check out those odds. Get this $200 in bonus bets, man. You do not want to miss that at FanDuel.com. You had to figure that Mack Brown's press conference on Monday was going to be interesting following everything that happened after Saturday's 70-50 loss to James Madison. All the confusion around, wait, Mack Brown's retiring? Mack Brown's not retiring. What's happening? All the back and forth, all the speculation. Was so grateful that Mack Brown decided to put that to rest on Monday at his press conference. So basically, here's how he cleared this up. I'm walking off the field thinking I'm responsible for all this. It's on me. So I should ask the players about leadership if they feel good about me moving forward. It's something I shouldn't do. I shouldn't put that pressure on those young people at that point. I'm supposed to be a leader, and probably the worst things I've said in my life are after losses. The kids were overwhelmingly, come on, coach, let's go. Let's move forward. So we're doing that. We're excited about the future. I love my job, love these kids, love this place. And that's why I hate losing so much. And interestingly, went on to say, I didn't really think that much about it after we did it, because it's just like, he's just talking to his guys. giving his guys the opportunity to say, yeah, coach, we don't think you have it anymore. And to the contrary, they're saying, coach, we're all in this together, man. We didn't execute. We got to execute better. All of that. And so it really could have and should have ended there. In fact, Mack Brown made some almost seemingly passive aggressive comments about how the locker room used to be sacred and apparently it's not anymore. Clearly frustrated with whoever, and I would be too, for the record, whoever had the loose lips that were sinking all of Mack Brown's career ships, is where it was. But anyway, this is where it got really interesting for me in the press conference. Mack says at the end of his kind of opening comments, I'll keep my mouth shut after losses from now on. Sally told me I needed to keep my mouth shut, so I will. At that point, he was done with his opening statement and ready for questions. The first reporter, I couldn't tell who specifically it was, but it was a woman, and she asked about the post-locker room confusion. Before even answering, Coach Brown said, let's talk about Duke, meaning I'm going to answer this, and then let's get on to talking about this week. Let's look ahead. So he said, let's talk about Duke. And then he answered the question by basically deflating what went on in the locker room. He ended that by saying, quote, that's all it was. If I was going to quit, I would have come in here, meaning the media room, and done it, end quote. And unfortunately, that was the next thing reporters picked up on. They wanted to start asking more questions about this, more clarity and all that. At that moment, Mack Brown puts up both hands and cuts off all the reporters and says, we're not talking about that anymore. Let's go to Duke. We've got it handled. And he stopped. And then a reporter persisted. From what it sounded like to me, I'm pretty sure it was Adam Smith from Inside Carolina. And he said, Mack, it's a question I need to ask. I was really grateful for Adam, even though Coach Brown had just said what he needed to. Clearly, this was a question that had to be followed up on. To just understand the psyche. So it was wild that Mack Brown said, we're not going to talk about that anymore. I mean, he was being firm and definitive if you heard the tone of his voice. But Adam, I'm again assuming it was Adam, said, Mack, it's a question I need to ask. You said if you would have quit, you would have come in and told us. With respect to that, the people who were in the locker room, the players and adults, left, it is our understanding, thinking you had quit. Are you saying they misinterpreted what you said in there? Mack Brown says, yes. I asked them if they wanted new leadership, and they said no. I backed away to think about it, and I told them, let's go forward. Let's get ready for Duke. So, I mean, this was a wild exchange. And then because of how that opened kind of the floodgates, there were then like 9 or 10 more questions about the whole locker room confusion and communication gap and all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it was pretty nuts. But Mack Brown, as you would expect from him, was cool, calm, and collected. He didn't get angry or frustrated. He was measured as always and answered each question and then moved on. So he was very firm, but then as reporters kind of wormed their way in, he let them, and then they eventually moved on to Duke, which we also need to do because Coach Brown said that he thought heading into the James Madison game, they had a good week of practice. He felt really good about the team, but he said, quote, there were entirely too many mistakes during the game. And it's been an interesting move. After the game on Saturday, UNC did not make any players available to the media, and they did that again on Monday. Coach Brown went, and then each of the coordinators, Chip Lindsey and Jeff Collins, but no players to be made available to us all week. Tar Heel Illustrated reported on this and said that a UNC spokesman had said to them that they were, quote, just letting them, the players, focus on Duke, end quote. And that makes sense. Look, it's a new head coach. Mike Elko is out the door and elsewhere. And and now you've got this rematch of Mack Brown and his former DC in Manny Diaz. So that's going to be really interesting. And oh, by the way, Duke is leading the country in TFLs, tackle for losses, and second in the country in sacks. So really, as Mack said, and as he tried to do continually in his press conference, it's almost comical as you go watch it, just kept trying to push toward the Duke game and away from everything that had just happened. And I respect that. I get it. But the reporters also had their job to do, and he understands that. So Let's wrap up with our Trivia Tuesday question. Jacoby Criswell threw for 475 on Saturday, third most ever in a single game in Carolina history. Prior to that, who occupied spots 1 through 5? We're going to go in reverse order, and I will tell you there's one name on this list twice, and that name, well, I'm going to let you guess who it is. Number 5 on our list, a young man named Sam Howell, who threw for 443 yards at Virginia in 2020. Number 4 on this list, Drake May, 448 yards in 2022 at Wake Forest. And then the top 3 were all at home. Number 3, Mitch Trubisky, 2016, obviously, 453 yards at home against Pitt. Number 2 on the list, Marquise Williams, 494 yards in 2015 at home against the Dukies. Let's make that happen again this weekend. Jacoby Criswell, what's up? And number 1 on the list, who's going to be the double entrant? Sam Howell, the only Tar Heel ever to cross the 500-yard passing yards threshold in a single game. 550 against Wake in 2020. My goodness, that is a big fat number. All right, gang, that's it for today's show. I want to remind you the ACC schedule comes out tonight. We're going to go live after that. Myself, Coach Pat Kilby will join me. We'll break it down. We'll give you our impressions, toughest stretches, other observations, other takes. Make sure you tune in on YouTube with us to get all that information. If you haven't subscribed to the show on YouTube and on audio, make sure you do that. Also on YouTube, hit that bell notification. That way, as soon as we go live tonight, you'll get notified and you can tap right in. If you haven't joined the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, I would love to invite you to come join us there. It's free, and the link is in the show notes. Come for the Tar Heels, stay for the community. Also, come be one of the brand new Locked On Tar Heels insiders where you get to chat, you get to text with me one-on-one. You get access to all of my stats and data, my record books that I make that have like every point ever recorded by a Tar Heel in it, for example. All of that, you get to try it for a 2-week trial. Then it's just $5 a month after that. All right, y'all, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk tonight after the ACC schedule reveal, but until then, peace.